Hello, everybody. My name is Francis Defau. I am the marketing manager at Codit, and I would like to welcome you to this Codit webinar on application modernization. Thank you already for spending the coming 30 minutes with us. Now, today's webinar is the second one in a series of 5 that we have set up for you. So the first one was last week where we talked about the future of integration. In case you've missed it, check out our website and look for the webcast in our events section. So next week, we will talk about securing APIs. The week after, so the 18th of May, IoT will be on the agenda, and in particular IoT Edge, where we will share some use cases and features. And then we will close this series off the 20th of May with blockchain in practice, where we will give you more insights on how blockchain can be used in any type of organization. But today the topic is an application modernization and how you can find the best way to the cloud for your organization. The host we have for today is my colleague Sam van Houten. Sam is our CTO at Codit. And besides that, he's also an MVP and a speaker at various international conferences. So with his knowledge and skills, he's very well placed to talk about today's topic. Now, should you have any questions during this webinar, please don't hesitate to use the Q&A section. Sam will handle your questions if it's possible during the webinar, and otherwise it will be at the very end. Now with that, I will leaving you in the safe virtual hands of Sam.
Thank you, Francis, and hello everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar on application modernization. This might as well be my first webinar that I'm performing on slippers because of this situation where we're all working from home now. So today I'll talk about why modernization is definitely something that we see more and more traction with at different customers. And I'll talk about the different strategies that you can follow to modernize existing applications. Because there's a lot of existing applications that you can approach in different manners. And to finalize everything, of course, I'll talk about 5 services and strategies that you can leverage and patterns to modernize these applications for people. So, of course, what we are seeing is that companies are shifting. Every company is becoming a software company nowadays. We see that these business models are newly reinvented. And we see, for example, that customers think about a builder that was just selling chocolate machines. Now suddenly they are adding services, software services, and building a software platform around these chocolate machines. We see the same things with energy companies delivering subscriptions and smart metering with added value services. And same thing with transport and logistics that is suddenly changing and adding a new way of billing, and not just the time being used, but maybe also the profit that people are making is taken into account. And all of that is requiring these companies to start building software platforms. And of course, what we also see is that the data that companies have been building and collecting over these past decades with IT, this data is often still locked up in silos. And we see that integration really can help to mix and match data and to add new insights on top of that. So what we've seen recently is that more and more customers start to realize that because we are based and built our company on top of integration, that we can help them in building these data platforms that collaborate and consolidate the data from these different silos. So we've been doing this for years, and we really see that if you collect the data together, that you can really have much more insights and scenarios built on top of that. Of course, what we also see is that the data intelligence, so it's not just about visualizing data and making sure that we leverage the data. The thing is that if you really empower new scenarios with intelligence, and quite often artificial intelligence through either deep learning or machine learning, we really see that you can speed up these digital transformation projects, because again, unlocking the data and adding these insights on top of that is really driving companies forward nowadays. Now, application modernization is really going in through different triggers, and I'll talk about a few of them. What we definitely see is that quite often companies start to realize that they have to breathe new life in existing applications. There could be existing legacy applications that have to be added on, and of course, quite often we see that existing contracts, both in the on-prem data centers or hosted data centers, as well as software that suddenly has to be renewed. These typically trigger customers to start to reconsider approaches to applications, because quite often these companies as well have already taken first steps into PaaS or SaaS applications towards the cloud. At the same time, what we also see is that existing solutions that exist have to get new features. They have to be enabled for new business opportunities in cases where the business is seeing that they have to take a direction in. And quite often the realization happens that these existing applications not necessarily have the design and the methodology or the full life cycle to deliver these features faster and to iterate and add value quite often faster. So again, that triggers customers to really start thinking about how can we take these existing applications and modernize both parts of it, or maybe even fully. Of course, I think we're in this period nowadays where we see that scale really matters. Think about the impact that the past month has had for a lot of software companies, where suddenly they have to really scale out and scale up their infrastructure. I think Microsoft is one of them, the most known here, where they saw an increase with the tool that we're using for this webinar, Teams. That was tremendous, and even they, as a hyperscale, were feeling that at a very high level. So capacity needs that have to scale because of unforeseen or sometimes foreseen reasons is really something that is not possible in the traditional applications quite often. So you really feel that either the full application or parts of the application have to be redesigned if you want to meet these capacity needs and be flexible in scaling. And then, of course, other things with compliance, privacy, software things and security, that is also quite often something that gets more and more attention, where customers start to realize that they have to take some steps. So you can see that there's a big variety of reasons why customers have to think about moving applications in a more modern approach. And of course, that's where cloud is definitely shining and helping customers. However, of course, there's always challenges. You will see challenges on different levels, starting with code, for example. It's easy to say that cloud is ready to scale, and yes, that is right. But that does not mean that the application that you might have is ready to scale. You really have to make sure that you look at the components and the parts that build this application to see if that is ready to scale and take benefit of the cloud. And that's definitely something that is key there. Same thing with infrastructure. Quite often there is, in the scenarios that we see at customers, that could be from IoT to integration, but at the same time with existing API and data platforms, you see that there's a need for different people to really connect with existing infrastructure on-prem. So the hybrid deployments and hybrid connectivities, that is really something that is needed in these modern applications. Okay. At the same time, for data, as I said, data is quite often growing and growing, but customers are not necessarily taking the right value out of that data. So the data is quite often locked up in data silos. And of course, you could have, performance constraints, and of course the data evolves and data contracts have to change. And these things are also something that customers have to realize that you have to be able to scale and to change your application to cope with these new behaviors. And I believe all of that together can only be achieved if we really focus on application delivery. We want to release faster, as I said, we want to improve the quality, and all of that is really only possible if you really take the DevOps mindset, where you have automated pipelines that automatically test everything, and that you can very easily, with a high degree of trust, release new features into production in an automated manner. And so we really adopted, I think, since I think 3 to 4 years, we really adopted the methodology in our company that we don't want to deliver anything in the cloud without having an automated manner for deployment. So that is definitely something important. Let's move to the next one, where we see that there's a lot of different flavors available. You can focus on infrastructure as a service, on platform as a service. At the same time, the new approaches where serverless and, of course, software as a service are helping us in moving from today's situations to the future. What we see is that applications are changing. In the past, we've had these applications, and there might be issues with the connection. So maybe I should check with the organizers. Francis, are you still seeing the connections? Because I see that there's 3 Q&A questions.
Yes, I am. Yes.
So I can continue then. Okay, thank you. So what we see is that applications have been built in silos and typically focused on one front end back in the days. Think about these one web end, for example. But what we see is that you want to have the same functionality and the same business value offered in multiple front ends nowadays. You want to start using multi-channel applications, as we call them. Think about using chatbots. Think about having apps on the mobile phone, and of course web apps. But at the same time, quite often you want to expose functionality that you have built towards other people. That could be the community, that could be your partners, your business partners, and so on. So all of that really requires to have a design mind shift, where you think about opening data towards the outside world. What we also see is that you have a lot of different form factors for these applications, and not everyone is using a PC, so you have all these things that come. At the same time, we see that AI is powering more and more functionalities in applications, and for that, of course, the good thing is that a lot of customers have collected and have built a lot of data platforms in the past, so that they can really leverage that to add these functionalities in the existing applications. So that's definitely a big plus. And of course, you see that applications have to be built now with scale in mind, and not for every part, because we realize that not every application that a customer has, that an organization is using, will be needed to scale towards the cloud. Now, the approaches that we see in modernizing applications really comes with a different maturity, and what we see is that not every application will follow the same path. There's definitely applications that you can approach in a different manner than the other ones. So for example, looking at the existing applications that you have on-prem, quite often you can leave these applications on-prem. Think about situations where you might not shift the application because you know that it's an end of life, for example. Another approach that you can have is just the lift and shift. What does that mean? You actually focus on the infrastructure. You say, okay, we will probably take less advantages of the cloud native benefits. Think about platform as a service and so on. And we will just focus on moving the application as is onto the cloud infrastructure. And we really take care of that. What you also can do is the cloud optimization. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, where you can really start to think about parts of the application that you redesign and you make cloud native. And at the same time, of course, another approach that you can have but that definitely is the approach where you really have to think about refactoring and modernizing everything, is where you do a real application modernization that contains rewriting and redesigning on cloud native technologies. Right? So you can see that the top approach really is all about minimal code changes, where if you want to move to the right side, that it's all about having more refactoring in place and so on. So what we see is, as I said, the ones on the left, that's typically for applications you want to phase out, that you consider as legacy, that you just want to have supported, but you don't see a lot of business added value for these applications in the future of your company. At the same time, what we also see is that for the lift and shift, customers sometimes see that as an intermediate step or a potential intermediate step. So they start with that because, for example, the hardware is end of life and not coping with existing needs anymore. So you just take the application as is and the architecture towards the cloud, focusing on infrastructure as a service. Then, of course, you also have the things where customers start to realize that they need more scalability needs. And for example, security is something that gets more and more attention for these applications. That's where you want to start talking about this. And then the real strategic applications where you talk about new functionalities, new business streams, these are the ones where we feel that customers are really taking the modernization approach and really focus on cloud native. And of course, that's where platform as a service comes in. So platform as a service, and I think this is a scenario that we've all seen, the difference between having existing applications, taking benefits of infrastructure that is owned by the vendor, in this case, Microsoft, then moving to platform as a service where we as partner and you as a customer can really focus just on the business value on the application and the data. And then, of course, we see that customers for applications that they can just take out of the box and deliver value to their business, that software as a service can be really helpful. Okay? So that's definitely something that should be known. And we see that platform as a service is an area where we really focus most for the modern applications, because it really gives us the possibility to have a tailor-made solution, but taking a lot of out-of-the-box components. So we mix and match these. By default, all of these services have support for autoscale. Some of them even can scale to 0, which is a challenging thing, but a very powerful one. They are secure by design. And of course, the only thing that they offer is to be customized and to be mixed and matched into that application. Right? And we realize that hybrid is definitely crucial in these scenarios. At the same time, by taking advantages of platform as a service in, for example, Microsoft Azure, you really take advantage of building on an evolving platform. So the features by Microsoft are constantly being added. You automatically have monitoring and rules and so on, and event-based rules by design. And the good thing, and that empowers everything for the agility in your application. Everything is automated from a deployment point of view. So it's quite powerful also because all the services are in the same platform. It's quite powerful and easy to add new features. What you can quite easily do is just add data analytics on top of it. And you just connect to your existing data store and you can start doing new features. Think about cognitive services. If you want to have basic chatbot functionality, or you want to have automated speech recognition and things like that, it's quite easy to just add that existing service and link it with the existing data that you have. Okay? So the thing is that with platform as a service, you really focus on building value rather than building infrastructure. Okay? So that's definitely something crucial there. The most interesting part of this talk, in my opinion, is this one. And I see that more people have been joined again after the connectivity issues. So these 5 patterns, you could say, for application modernization. Right? So first of all, as I said, we talk about infrastructure, data, and code. And these things are different, but they always work together to have an application. So the infrastructure is where does the application run on, and that infrastructure will always be there, even for serverless. The thing is that we just don't have to manage the infrastructure behind the scenes in those cases. What is the application doing? So that's typically with the data. what does it work with, and then of course the code defines what it does. Now, everything that you want to leverage here in the 5 patterns that we will talk about are containers, microservices, a data lake approach, serverless, and then at the bottom, everything around DevOps. Right? So I believe that containers have gained their importance more and more. I think it started all around 5 years ago. But if you see now with every single cloud vendor, containers are more and more needed and actually considered as default technology. So the way of deploying things to both the cloud and on-prem really helps by containerizing application functionalities. So you can take services, you can take functions, you can even have machine learning models and just deploy them across the platform. That could be to the edge in IoT scenarios or in manufacturing and offline scenarios, for example. You can deploy them in the cloud, and actually you can deploy them in any cloud because containers are typically cross-platform. And the good thing is that for your existing applications, quite often it's with a small effort, it's quite easy to modernize your existing service or existing application into a container and have it deployed somewhere else. Right? And by doing so, at least you automatically have versioning support for the application, you have CI/CD capabilities, and you can deploy in infrastructures such as Kubernetes that are automatically set up in a much scalable, more scalable way. Right? Another approach that we see is that to have flexibility and to carve out specific functionality that microservices can help. And I know that microservices is maybe a very marketized term, but what we see is that an application exists of different pieces, and not every single piece has to be modernized, and not every single piece is changing constantly. So what you see is that with carving out some functionalities, you can say, okay, let's take this specific feature that we feel requires more attention because of whatever the reason, and you can carve it out into a microservice and push that into the cloud, right? So you can ship services as independent containers in this case. And the good thing is that API management, for example, and I believe the next webinar is on API management and security, definitely helps because by doing so, you can take it in a phased approach. You don't have to go with a big bang. You can really say we will take service by service and move these services into the different infrastructures. I would also call out the Codit webinar that has been done by Tom Kerkhoven. So you can watch the recording with this link, and that talks about how to approach monoliths versus microservices, because not every application has the need for a microservice approach. And then, as I said, one of the most relevant things that we see at customers is that customers want to take data from their silos, have an integration or have a synchronization using what we call data pipelines, where, for example, Data Factory or Synapse is definitely helpful services. And actually, they start to fill their data lake. You don't have to, it's not because you start your data lake project today that you can only start taking the data as of today. What we see is that these projects typically start by taking historical data and also making sure that you have an initial load of historical data into the data lake. And by doing so, you lock out the data from these different platforms, and you allow both internal people as well as developers in your company and also your partners, if you want, to collaborate on that data and to start building new functionalities and new pieces on top of that. And that's, of course, where machine learning and so on can really help. So again, by building new applications or even new services on top of that data lake, you can very quickly move forward and add these functionalities, typically combined with API management, for example. Okay. The other approach that we see is that the serverless approach, the one where we see a lot of possibilities out of the box, cloud native possibilities, is where you can say, we, for example, have an existing application that is built, that is writing data into a SQL database or sending data to an IoT hub and so on. But just by adding, for example, an event hub, event grid trigger, you can say if a message arrives on that queue, or if an image has been uploaded from our website, on that event, you can just write a full independent, what we call serverless piece of functionality. In this case, for example, kicking off a logic app that does a translation of something that has happened and sends an email. All of that is really costing close to zero per execution, right? So you can really benefit from the out-of-the-box services here, and don't have to reinvent things to inject in your application. You can really add it just by using these events and so on. And that's really something where we feel that customers can take a lot of benefits. And then the other one that I believe is key, and I hope that everyone realizes that if you want to deploy applications in an agile way, that there's more people involved, that you have a lot of different features in parallel being developed, and that you have to really think about a good strategy there. And that's where DevOps, of course, is shining. And so we see that both with Azure DevOps and GitHub being owned and maintained by Microsoft now, that all of that becomes by default as a first-class citizen in every single service that is available on the Azure platform. Right? So as I said, we are never releasing something into production without having all these best practices, such as branching strategies, peer reviews, automated testing, having all the infrastructure automatically updated, having all the monitoring rules being set so that people in our managed services team or at your support team can really get insights and be triggered. All of that really is crucial in order to have that flexible way of deploying applications into the cloud. Right? So that's definitely a must from our point of view. So to wrap up on the strategies, we really see that cloud native or all these things can be combined for cloud native applications, what we call greenfield solutions, because we focused in the past half hour on what with existing applications and how can we take either the full applications or parts of the application into the cloud. If you have to start a greenfield application, the good thing is that, of course, you don't have the legacy to take with, and you can immediately focus on building the greenfield application on cloud native platform as a service. And that's, of course, where you pick your hosting solution. So you can go for Kubernetes, which comes with a lot of advantages, but also a lot of responsibilities and challenges. Or you can say, no, let's go with a serverless approach because we feel that's the best fit and so on. The same thing with data storage. Data lake will not always be the best approach. You might definitely have scenarios where you want to combine it with, for example, SQL for reporting and so on. Or maybe Cosmos DB because you need hyperscale and you don't want to depend on the relational tables and things like that. The same thing with your messaging. You have to think about how do we do the integration? How do we expose data to the outside world? Right? So Azure provides all these services, but still you have to pick the right service for the right approach. And that's, of course, where we typically are happy to help. Right? A good and very interesting case is the one of the Belgian Mobile ID that if you're Belgian, you might definitely know it from It's Me. So It's Me is a way to authenticate yourself in a very secure way with banking, with mobile telecom providers, and of course with the Belgian government, for example. And that application actually was residing at a hosted data center, so in a private data center. But because of the success of this application, they really saw that the scalability could not be maintained. And so what we did, we applied the carve-out strategy. So we said, okay, let's take the functionalities that are really key and have to be scalable from the start. And that's, of course, all the handshaking between these mobile applications and the actual backend. And let's move that to platform as a service while there was still infrastructure think about hardware secure modules and things like that, that had to be on-prem. And then we can do some lift and shift where we said, okay, let's move that part of this infrastructure also into the cloud. And in that way, the application did not have any, let's say, downtime or had to do a drastic full redesign. No, it was really carving out piece by piece and moving everything while the application kept running. And that's definitely something that we see quite often at applications or services that have started quite small, but then suddenly become quite successful, and customers realize that they have to take that modernization approach. So the result that we now have is definitely that after the rebuild, that we are not just future-proof and scalable, but at the same time, we can, the application is ready because the DevOps is in place and so on, to add new features and to add and expose data wherever things are needed. So the business opportunities are, of course, coming for this. Then another interesting case is the one for Swiss Re. Yeah, so that's one of the largest reinsurers in the world, where we actually applied all these principles and all these patterns, but in a greenfield application, so in a cloud native approach. So what this customer does is they actually provide micro insurances, for example, for people that want to take the plane, which is of course nowadays a little bit hard, but you can insure yourself for flight delay, for example, because you might have to have an important business meeting and you want to make sure that if the flight is delayed, that at least you get some compensation for whatever missed opportunities and so on. Of course, this is a platform that is quite challenging and it starts small, but they have to be ready to scale with customer needs and of course with the success of the platform. So going with PaaS was the easy decision, and it's really the PaaS first approach that we took. And what is key there is that this is a combination of having machine learning to predict flight delays. It's a combination of having integration to take data from all these different applications, such as flight information and so on. And it's a system that is event and messaging based, because every new insurance that is being closed is being followed up, because there's automatic payment, there's follow-up of every single flight that gets insured and things like that. So all of that is definitely, was only possible by using platform as a service. And also the infrastructure costs are typically small enough to start and to try out the business. And they know that they can scale with the success of this application and this platform. So to end this webinar, what we typically offer is that we can help you in getting started with an assessment on your existing applications, your infrastructure, and see, okay, how can we help you in modernizing applications, and which strategies should we follow for which applications? Because as I said, it's definitely not that every single application has to be refactored and redesigned into a cloud native application. So we can really walk you through that and offer you then, of course, the solution architecture, our strategy document if you want, and a scope and an estimation. So these things are available with this assessment. As takeaway, what I believe that we should keep in mind for future business and future opportunities in modernizing your applications is really that you only do application modernizations for applications where you feel that you need the flexibility, that you might need to scale, that you want to focus on functionality and care much less about the actual underlying infrastructure, and that you want to make sure that you isolate the responsibilities and the functionalities from each other. You want to run on the compute of your choice. And that's definitely something that is very powerful. You might have developed something that you want to deploy in the cloud in a hyperscale manner, but at the same time, that same piece of functionality or that same machine learning model or service might have to run close to the devices on the edge. And all of that, of course, ideally should result into a much lower cost solution. What we also have as an interesting thing to get you started is this white paper, or let's say the guide in making the move to modern applications. So this white paper can be downloaded from our website and should help you getting started, avoid all the roadblocks, and make sure that you have the right, let's say, path to the cloud. Right? And we definitely talk a little bit more and a little bit more in detail about these different patterns that we have discussed in this webinar. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed this webinar.